Okay, I think that's time, and we've got our attendees joined, so we'll kick off this webinar. So welcome to another one of our weekly Wednesday webinars. And today we are jumping into our new dSOC service, which we've launched recently. So really to go from insight to action and looking at how we maximize your Darktrace investment. We see dSOC as an essential service to really enable customers to maximize the investment they've made in Darktrace, a brilliant technology, brilliant product that is being rapidly expanding. But one of those challenges is, how do you really operationalize it? How do you get the very best out of it? Quite often, customers experience Darktrace as a more noisy product. And it's definitely something that, although it delivers the value, does need the right feed and watering to maximize it. And that's really the essence of what we're going to get through today. So I'm joined today by two colleagues to help me on this. So I'll just introduce them if you want to pop your cameras on, guys. So we'll start with Omar. Omar is one of our technical product managers and previously led on MDR and other security services across Adama and BT Security. And now at Integrity 360 leads our entire threat detection and response portfolio. So afternoon, Omar. And we're also joined by Chris Durand. Chris leads Grove's managed services and services as the product owner for managed dSOC. So our guy that's got all of the dSOC knowledge and will be walking through the majority of our presentation and webinar today. Chris has a strong background in service delivery and cybersecurity and has been instrumental in transforming the Darktrace services that we're talking through today in a fully managed service overall. So just briefly there as I move on, I mentioned Grove. Grove was a recent acquisition by Integrity 360, and they provide and deliver a Darktrace center of excellence, so well renowned across the globe and all the territories they operate, but also importantly within Darktrace. And Darktrace see what these guys do, the capability they have and the service they deliver as again being something that's essential for helping their customers maximize the value of that great product that they provide. They're a focused value-added reseller and service provider, but most importantly, a trusted security partner to their customers, which is a great fit for Integrity 360 because that's the way that we work with our customers as trusted security advisors. So we're really joining the two capabilities together. And that's actually important as part of this webinar, as we are focused on the dSOC service, which we have built and enhanced alongside Grove with our own NDR service around Darktrace to create and launch a single service delivering an end-to-end Darktrace capability. So in terms of the agenda today, and I'll hand off to Chris very shortly. So we're going to walk through, addressing that customer need. What are the key challenges? What is managed dSOC? So what is the service we're talking about? Walk through the benefits that dSOC can provide, and then looking at how it all comes together. And then lastly, just touching on our services overall, and then jump into a Q&A. So as always on the weekly webinar series, we have a QA function available, so please feel free to ask questions throughout, and we will answer those during the Q&A session. So I will just hand off to Chris. Chris, you should have control now. I'll just move you on, and over to you.
Thanks, Rich. Struggling to find the mute button. We haven't been doing this for 3 years or more. So thanks. I'm going to take us through some of the key challenges that we're facing or that our customers are facing in cybersecurity at large, and also with our customers who are using Darktrace as their tool of choice, or amongst the many multiple tools they may have. So the first one is always complex threat landscape. It's always increasing, always growing, and we see a sharp increase throughout the year Sometimes there's even a sharper increase at certain times of the year. But the one thing is constant is there is always an increase. And not only an increase in number, complexity is also becoming an issue, particularly with the advent of AI and AI-powered attacks. There certainly is a market for malicious code driven by AI. And AI used in social engineering makes it increasingly difficult to distinguish between what is malicious and what is not. So cyber threat or complex threat landscape is an ever-present threat or challenge. The next one is the lack of internal resources and expertise for those who want to build a capacity internally. Now, to manage tools across the board, we need skilled analysts. We need a team to keep a finger on the pulse, if you will. And talent is rare. It's costly to recruit, to train, and also retain those resources or those analysts once we've built that team. And then, of course, 24/7 is another consideration that will increase the cost and complexity. If we're serious about cybersecurity, we need to take a 24/7 stance against adversarial behavior. And then underutilization of Darktrace's full capabilities. This is something we see quite often, where Darktrace is a premium product. And with that comes a premium price tag. So it is absolutely important that we harvest the full value of Darktrace. Darktrace is vast in its capabilities, and many admins miss this, or they miss delving deeper into the full benefit stack. And everybody has 1,000 things to do in a very short time every day, and that's what also adds to the complexity about not exploring the full value of Darktrace. And many admins also don't pay too much attention to the configuration, the integrity of the configuration, which leads to misconfiguration, which ultimately leads to risk. So not because of anything other than the Darktrace appliance is not configured optimally to be able to take a good stance against those malicious activity. Limited response capability for high severity events. So the best defense in the world is to know what to do and when to do it. And this is particularly so with high severity alerts. And this is where you need the expertise to make the right call at the right time, to filter out the noise and to help the on-site teams focus on those events that are most critical. And so those events that have the greatest potential for harm. And that's what our service offers. We allow your teams we enhance your team to deal with those high severity events if and when they happen. And of course, the inability to maintain a 24/7 monitoring response. Risk is ever present. Adversaries don't take breaks. They don't take holidays. They are always there. So it's absolutely essential that we maintain that cyber vigilance. And this can only be done if we're always on, if you will. The next slide talks about what the dSOC service is. So the dSOC service is something that we built with Darktrace in mind. So all the intelligence we gather is based on what Darktrace tells us. And although most of the threat intelligence comes from Darktrace primarily, there are integrations available that extend the scope of what Darktrace covers and what Darktrace sees. It also allows an integration into our broader managed services, which we'll talk about in a moment. But there is a lot of, as with Darktrace as the cornerstone, there is a lot of integrations where we can extend the scope and extend our response capabilities as well through our robust service offering. So I'm going to go through some of the points or the benefits of managed dSOC. It's not all-encompassing, but these certainly stand out as probably our most important or most feature-rich points or benefits. So first thing, it's purpose-built wraparound service for Darktrace. As I explained, all the intelligence we get comes from Darktrace, and we report on that, of course. Managed dSOC services maximizes your Darktrace investment. So we want to make sure that we are able to extract every ounce of value out of Darktrace so that you as a customer gets the best from Darktrace. We have a team of analysts ready who have been trained. They go through quite a rigorous learning program, and all they do is consume Darktrace. They analyze Darktrace all day. So their focus is on Darktrace, which allows us as a service to give you that focus points in terms of how you mitigate risks in your environment. A response SLA, that goes without saying. So Darktrace, as an example, won't offer you a service level agreement. They'll offer assistance, of course, if you log tickets and so on and so forth, but they're not governed by a service level agreement. And time to respond is absolutely critical when it comes to security events. So we do offer a SLA. We've kept it very simple, and the details of the SLA can be made available, of course, on request. But we do have a SLA that governs all of our responses. Flexibility and scalability. So, one of the things we are able to do with our service, is our service offering includes a number of tiers, if you will. So we have an entry-level service within the dSOC stable that does things like platform operational monitoring, in other words, keeping the appliance in good performance-wise in tip-top shape. We do daily IOCs, which means we are there every day in terms of our reporting. So you can expect a report from us 365. You'll get a report talking about the day's risks. I'll talk more about that in a moment, but that's some of the things you'll expect to receive within that entry-level service. We move on to an intermediate service where we do model optimization. There's some 24/7 monitoring and alerting, and also high-valued asset tagging. It goes on to an advanced MDR option where we're able to do 24/7 instant response and containments. And also we offer a wonderful unified customer portal. And that all comes to life with DT events, Darktrace events, that feeds that customer portal. But beyond these, we also have a solution that integrates with the broader MDR services on offer from Integrity 360, which cover many cybersecurity streams and technologies. For example, Fortinet and related services to that as well, pen testing and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of flexibility in what we offer and scalability in terms of how you grow as an organization. As your cyber maturity increases and your security posture improves, we can offer services to match that level. And that ties in very well with the next point about achieving I'm trying to get that to work. Right, so this talks about improving the site maturity scale. So Darktrace has made this graphic available. And basically what it's telling us is that the level of interaction, in other words, the amount of time we spend on Darktrace is directly related to the amount of proactiveness we're going to achieve. So when we're in the imminent threat space, we are relying heavily on the automation of Darktrace. And that's fine because Darktrace is designed to cater for that. It's designed to cater for responding to machine speed threats at machine speed. And that's very important. But as you move on, you start investigating a bit more. You're looking at, for example, higher scoring devices, top scoring model breaches, and perhaps the attack phase. You want to understand that. So that gives you a good indication of where the vulnerabilities are, where my risks are, and how long these adversaries are in my network before I start seeing these activities. And that gives you great insight. You sort of preparing yourself for the next level of predicting where the next threat is going to come from. And when you get into the future threat stage, you're now looking at the models that are relevant to you. Darktrace has developed over 600 models. Not all of them will be relevant to a single customer, but you will find those ones that are most relevant to you. And then you can start building what they call model defeats or model enhancements, and you can make it more relevant to your organization. So, of course, all of these services, it depends where you are in your maturity scale and where you are in your security posture. But Integrity 360 can offer services at any level. It doesn't matter where you are. And of course, we can take you beyond your current security posture and improve on that with our embedded or integrated MDR services as well. So that talks about the cyber maturity scale, de-risking the cyber skills gap. So like I said earlier, talent is rare. Maintaining that talent pool is also a very difficult process to ensure that we keep our analysts more at the forefront of our cybersecurity, interested and excited about working in our environment. One of the things we do is we offer a multi-layered approach or a multi-level approach in terms of cyber skills. So we have obviously the first level. You can think of these as our first responders. They are the individuals who will compile that daily report. They are the individuals or analysts that you'll be dealing with most frequently, and they will be sending those reports to you in that first responder space. And that's where they are very, very effective. Above them, we have the second level of analysts, also the first point of escalation. These are usually our team leads, and they serve a purpose, a dual purpose. They can very well act in the first responder space, but they can also act in that assisted investigation space, where let's say you receive a report and you have a question, and that necessitates a log or a ticket to be logged, and an investigation will ensue. Now, because our first tier analysts need to be in that first responder space, this is where the second level plays a pivotal role. They then have the time to take the investigation a bit further. So we need to keep our first responders in that space, of course, and then a second level can take the assisted investigations that require a bit more detail and a bit more back and forth with you, the customer, to make sure we mitigate that risk as quickly as possible. And then the third level is also the second point of escalation. This is also where our subject matter experts provide the triage and optimization sessions. So typically we do a once a month triage and optimization session, and that can take a number of forms. We could, or formats. We could, for example, focus on triage and identify the biggest areas of risk where your vulnerabilities lie, and we'll make recommendations as well. And then in the optimization space, it's about taking those models that I mentioned earlier and enhancing them and making them very geared towards your organization. Each organization is unique. Darktrace has the ability to identify that uniqueness, and through that, we're able to modify models and enhance models to make sure they are absolutely relevant to your organization. Right, so one of the, amongst the many key features we have is the proactive 24/7. So I just wanted to explain a bit about proactive and reactive. We've always had reactive services. So for example, on the back of that daily IOC indicator of compromise report, you could spark a conversation with our analysts. Those reports are sent from an analyst's mailbox, not from a no reply to address. So when you reply to an email, that analyst would then see the response and then take it further. That would mean that, and it doesn't matter what time of day or day of the year you ask that question or put that question forward. It could be 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. It could be 3 o'clock in the afternoon during the week. If you pose a question to us, to our team, we are geared and ready to respond to it 24/7. But that's reactive, right? That means when you reach out to us and ask us a question about a particular finding. With our proactive 24/7 active monitoring, a mouthful, yes, but it is a proactive service in that whenever certain events are triggered, Darktrace calls them enhanced monitoring. Now, these enhanced monitoring models usually indicate a serious event that's either about to happen or is happening. And there's about 45 of them. Of the 600 models that Darktrace has created, there's about 45 of these enhanced models. So when they triggered, and as part of one of our higher tiered services, you would get a response from an analyst. In other words, the analyst is going to make contact with you via telephone to let you know that something has just happened and that we need to contain as much as possible. We usually follow a principle of 1-10-30, which means a minute to find. That's the easy part. It's a matter of the events come to us, to our live dashboarding. We then do an investigation, and after that, we make contact with you to try and mitigate the risk as quickly as possible. Containment is what we are aiming to achieve with that process. Tied to that service also, we have high-value asset tagging, which is a similar approach. The difference here is that the high-value asset tagging is focused on assets rather than models. So when there's a breach against particular assets, which we'll identify with you, that triggers that same kind of response. I'm going to talk a bit about how it all comes together. And in this slide, I'm going to demonstrate or try to demonstrate how we deliver that service. What is it that we do on a daily basis? Now, this cuts across all of our offerings. At the core of our service, this is what we do on a daily basis. It's that ability to look for events that are relatively benign, relatively low severity, and that are easy to get rid of, as opposed to as they become more sophisticated. So we gain access to your threat visualizer or your Darktrace appliance. The user interface is called the threat visualizer. We would then add a few filters in, such as the date filter. We're always going to look at the day that was. So we'll add a couple other filters. We'll filter out acknowledgements as an example. There's no need to go through something that you as the customer have already acknowledged or that we've acknowledged. We'll filter out those as well. So once we have done our filters, the threat tray will present with the findings for the day. We will then take those findings from the threat tray and put them in our report, our daily IOC. There's a couple of blocks within that report. The first part being the EM enhanced monitoring. So when you subscribe to our dSOC Plus dSOC Plus MDR service, you will then get access to the 24/7. So at the time of the 24/7 active monitoring, you will get notified. And also that finding will become part of the report in the next day cycle. So front and center will have the enhanced monitoring, and this is where we do a deep dive. So we're going to try and find do the root cause analysis, because we're interested to find out where it started. We'll do an impact analysis because we want to know how far it's gotten, and then we'll make recommendations about that particular risk. The next part of the report is called notable breaches, and it also has elements of other breaches. The biggest difference between these two buckets is severity, where in EMs, we would look at anything from 80% and above in severity, so very serious events, and notable breaches, we'll look at sub 80% to approximately 45%. I say approximate because it's not an exact science. We have in the past found or EMs that are considered high severity with a lower severity. And that's the way Darktrace operates is it combines events, and those combined events determine the severity. So that's important to note that not all events are treated exactly the same. It's not just a severity. It depends on also the type of breach. So this area would contain both of them. And with other breaches, we usually find that these are in the lower ratings. 40% and downward is where we'd find the other breaches. The compliance breach analysis is about those elements or those things in your network that are a risk or a vulnerability, but they're not under attack right now. So, for example, it's like leaving the front door open when you have all the windows shut and tightly secure, but you've left the front door open. So it could pose a risk if left unchecked. So those are those kinds of analysis we do in that space. Our monthly health check has grown significantly over the years. In the past, it would be system alerts and a couple of things we check in terms of performance and configuration. So whereas we still do that, we've now extended it to making sure that backups are run frequently. We ensure that you're on the latest build. We'll do subnet tracking, and that's very important because as devices move through the network, they might change IP addresses. So with proper tracking in place, we can track the movement of those devices, and that's extremely useful in our investigations. We also do respond coverage tests, and this is a very crucial service. We might make sure that respond component. I mentioned earlier that Darktrace is able to take machine speed response. It's called the respond component. Now, we test that regularly. So we're going to run a few tests. We're going to ask that you run this test across all the corners of your network. So whether there's a physical or logical separation, we would encourage you to run those tests in all of those locations. And that's going to tell us whether the respond component is going to be effective. You certainly don't want to find that out during an outbreak, but before an outbreak, that Darktrace is able to cover all corners of your network. The blue circle talks about frequency. So I mentioned this a few times, and that's very important. If we consider a typical kill chain, I always reference the Lockheed Martin kill chain, and there are 7 steps in that chain that describes the progression of a threat. The first few steps are reconnaissance, installation, weaponization, or weaponization, installation, and so on and so forth, until it gets to the 7th step, which is success on objectives. In other words, that ransomware was the objective. There's been success. And when you're in this space, you are completely in a reactive state. You are reacting to something that's happened, that's caused a lot of harm in your environment. Now, because we conduct our analysis every single day, we get to see those activities that fall in the reconnaissance phase. And this is usually where the threat is low severity, low sophistication. And when it's at that state, it's so much easier to get rid of those threats when it's in that reconnaissance phase. Darktrace builds what's called patterns of life, and there could be millions in a single organization. Those patterns of life represent what's normal in a typical organization. So when we see deviations from patterns of life, it tells us that something that has not happened or is very rare is happening in the environment. For example, if you think about an Nmap fingerprint scan, that's very telling. The results of that scan can be very telling about an organization. So when we see that kind of activity from a workstation in HR, it is highly anomalous. It's unexpected. That user probably has not done it before. The activity is highly unusual. So we get to see those deviations on a daily basis and be able to advise you to react. And like I said, it's the easiest time to get rid of a prospect or a possible threat when it's at that stage. The triage and optimization. So these are the sessions we run once a month. And like I mentioned, you could have a triage and optimization session that could be around optimization. It could be about identifying the risks and so on and so forth. And we run these sessions with you in mind. It's essentially your time, and we will guide you in the initial sessions, but we could even, for example, run an informal over-the-shoulder training session to make sure your analysts are able to use Darktrace more efficiently and more effectively. So with that, I'm going to hand the mantle back to Rich.
Thank you very much, Chris. So just to add on to what Chris is saying, and obviously Chris talked through the needs and the requirements for making sure that your Darktrace implementation is finely tuned and able to identify threats, and really reducing some of that background noise to focus on those important model breaches, but also we want to work our way around to covering as many of the model breaches as possible, and that can only really happen through fine tuning and understanding what's going on. But the very next step after that point is, once we've got it fine tuned and once we're receiving alerts, is how do we respond to those incidents? And that's really where the combination of the dSOC service and Integrity's NDR service that we're able to provide comes into its own. So one of those key challenges that Chris mentioned at the very start is limited response capability for high severity events. Well, actually, I would say for any severity event. So particularly where there's an incident or in place, it's important that we respond and contain and eradicate that incident as soon as possible. And the reason there's a challenge, several factors that we've got on screen here: incident response expertise and experience. Having built our security managed services and SOC, and being involved in that over a long time, it does take particular skills, experience, and expertise to understand threats, to understand the response that's needed to deliver that. It's also having not just having the people with experience, but having them available all the time. So having round the clock security capability to affect that response is important. But then also having the technology capability to be able to carry out that response. And really, if we kind of break that down, if we've got threat activity in the environment, your Darktrace implementation is going to detect that. But importantly, it's detecting that because dSOC is doing its continuous tuning. This is the value where dSOC starts, but it's definitely not where it ends. So it starts by making sure that that platform is continuously tuned and able to identify those threats, and also being able to, rather than looking for a needle in a haystack, we're looking for the needle in a pile of needles, a very much smaller pile of needles. So the priority things that we're looking at. Once that alert is being identified by Darktrace, the dSOC analysts that are monitoring that environment, as Chris talked through, can carry out that analysis, whether that's being done proactively and reactively, should I say, 24/7, or as we'll come on to some of the more different periods. John, I'm forgetting my words there. And then once that's carried out, then we're looking at incident investigation. So these are the standard steps to go through to understand that threat and exactly what it is. But the important part is being able to respond to it. And again, something that we're able to provide as part of the dSOC service is that threat containment overall, because once we've identified that threat, it's important that we understand it. We understand the impact of it, the breadth of it, the scale of it, but importantly that we can take instant action to contain it. Chris talked about the Lockheed Martin kill chain. We can talk about the MITRE attack framework that all work left to right, but it's important that we can spot the threat as much to the left as possible on those timelines and effect a response quickly to mitigate any threat or any impact from that threat. And what we're able to do through the dSOC service is not just, it's how do we carry out that response? Through our integrations, we can respond through the network or firewall applications that are in the environment. So being able to block network activity, particularly when we're looking at Darktrace NDR. We have capabilities within Darktrace in terms of TCP resets on the network side. So we've got multiple ways that we can address that. We can also do it from an identity perspective. So making sure that we're hooked into legacy AD, but also Azure AD or Entra, depending on which phrase Microsoft terms their identity and access management platform at the time. Link into that so that we can block users, change passwords, and disable those user accounts, so that particularly for actions that are identity based, which most of them are, once they've breached and compromised an identity, obviously they'll look for privileged identities beyond that. But being able to disable those and stop them in their tracks, particularly from a network and identity perspective, is going to be the at least 90% of the pie. And then lastly, most importantly, how do we deal with the actions? Once we've responded, then obviously we need that feedback loop. So feeding back into the dSOC tuning process, so that once we've understood this threat and how we've responded to it, that we're making sure that we are tuning accordingly. As Chris mentioned, dSOC and the dedicated Darktrace managed service feeds up into our overall MDR service. So I'm not going to try and walk through our MDR service. We definitely haven't got time for that, and I'm sure we've there's a good few webinars online to walk through that, and we can obviously do it in more detail at a future point. But it very much integrates into our MDR service so that we can maintain that platform, get the very best out of it, but also interlink to other products and platforms in your environment to be able to have a complete full picture view and also to be able to respond and contain events across the entire estate. So with that, I'm just going to hand over to Omar, and I think very briefly to walk through our service offering. As Chris talked about, we offer this in 3 different flavors. So I'll hand over to yourself, Omar, and then we can get on to the Q&A. Oh, we can't hear you there, Omar.
Oh, thanks, Rich. A quick overview of our managed dSOC offering here. So we've got 3 tiers, as Rich mentioned. We've got the managed dSOC, we've got the managed dSOC Plus, and the third tier, which Rich has just talked about, which is the managed dSOC plus MDR. So primarily the first tier, which is the dSOC, managed dSOC, we talked about the optimization of your platform. We ensure your Darktrace systems are fully optimized for peak performance and configuration. Even a small misconfiguration can lead to a larger significant security gap. So we really focus on that optimization in this first tier. So we've kind of curated these 3 tiers according to the maturity scale that we talked about earlier, depending on where you are on that maturity scale. We created these service offerings to kind of focus on those. With the first tier as well, you get the proactive daily IOC report, which Chris mentioned earlier. So you receive that. It has highlights the daily indicators of compromise and the findings. So we want to kind of at the very earliest stage identify these threats in the earlier stages and take actions about those at the very earliest. The tier, which comes with everything that's in the first tier, but also on top of that, it has some extra, obviously, features. So you have the 24/7 active monitoring and alerting, for example, which, as the title of the service says, is the round-the-clock monitoring service to swiftly detect the malicious activities and alerting at the time when it happens. So you've got that in the second tier. Plus, another one to call out here is the high value asset tagging. So many of our customers, we understand from many use cases, have some top tier systems, most crucial systems, where they'd like heightened vigilance on these systems. So we identify them, and then there's a higher level of vigilance on those. And if there is even a lower severity alert on those, that action is taken on those assets. So kind of really important assets that are tagged that way. With the second tier, you also get some really personalized, curated monthly reports and a quarterly threat review as well. Very briefly, the third tier, I wouldn't go much into great detail, but this is our the full fat version of where all the telemetry can be integrated into a wider set of security tooling. And as an MDR customer, you would benefit from our proactive threat hunting, which is basically utilizing the threat intelligence, news, industry insights, and security events. All proactively and reactively, we conduct these threat hunts and provide case updates and presentation of findings in the threat briefings which follow these threat hunts. So a really high valued service for customers who are at that maturity scale that you saw at the higher end of it. So a very quick overview, and all these tiers you can opt in for our wider IR retainer or professional services, which are available to any tier of customers throughout. So yeah, that's just a quick
thanks,
thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Omar. And just I guess my insights there. With managed dSOC, what we see, and particularly what Grove have seen over the course of running the dSOC service, very applicable to organizations that are running their own SOC and security analyst capability, but need to hand off that fine-tuning and in-depth knowledge of the Darktrace platforms. And then obviously it's if we go further up those tiers, it's looking for how much of the security analysis that an organization requires. So that's it for the webinar in terms of the content that we had to present. So we'll just move on to the Q&A, and we've had a fair few questions throughout. So I will provide a few of the answers, or try and answer as many as possible in the time frame that we've got. If we don't answer any, then we will follow up afterwards with some answers for those. So I'm just one question in there that has kind of jumped out that I'll answer straight away is, are all services discussed here in place for our existing agreement in place? And secondly, is our DT set up correctly to enable all of these? So that's quite an individual question, so I'm not going to try and answer that on the call, but just to say, please reach out to your account manager and or your service delivery manager, and they can walk you through this and understand your coverage in terms of Darktrace services. What I will say is obviously this is a new service that we are launching in our collaboration with Grow following the acquisition to ensure that the Darktrace platforms are being monitored and managed to be as effective as possible. We have another question here, which is this service limited to Darktrace NDR? Chris, I'll hand that over to yourself to answer.
Yeah, so the service is limited to Darktrace initially. As Omar explained, there are a couple of tiers available across the different silos, but there isn't with our last offering, the dSOC plus MDR, where you can integrate with other services in the environment. So, for example, if you had a Fortinet, we could do a managed service around that. If you had other technology that you wanted to ingest, we could very well flow into a full SOC service as we progress from Darktrace, or dSOC for Darktrace, and then progress into other areas of your network. So initially, yes, dSOC is designed for Darktrace, but that doesn't mean that it stops there. If your requirement is more and your maturity is grown, then we can definitely take you much further than just focusing on one product.
Yeah, okay. And I think although that's all spot on, Chris, I think the question is probably aligned more to Darktrace sort of network or NDR products, covering multiple, I believe.
Yeah, so misunderstood the question. So yes, we offer value across all the silos, obviously more than others. For example, the network component is where we get our most value, network, and the cloud is where we get our most value. Email, of course, as well, but the one area where we don't delve too deeply in is in the OT side. And this is not because of a lack of capability. It's because the inner workings of an OT environment are much different from what you'd expect in an IT environment. Those codes, when they are triggered against a particular device that has a code or a process, is very unique to individual organizations. So whereas we can offer advice about the devices controlling those operational technology devices, we can't delve deeper into the operational technology itself. So across everything else, the 5 others, full value, OT, very limited value.
Okay, very good. A question here, is the service limited to 24/7, 365, or can we tailor it to our out of hours times, public holidays times, Christmases, etc.? So John, I'll have the first stab at answering that, and it's an interesting question. It's actually something that gets asked quite a lot, particularly around how do we have a collaborative service, and it's probably something that we can talk about individually or more directly to look at the potential, but it isn't something typically that we'll do because it's in reality quite complex, particularly if we look at the dSOC service in terms of the continuous tuning to sort of maximize that investment in Darktrace. That's something that needs to be done on an ongoing basis, but very much the analysis side, the way that I would view it, particularly if you've got if you're running your own security operations team, there is a need to and probably a desire to hand off some of the at least initial triage and investigation into alerts to make sure that actually your SOC team are dealing with the things that they really need to be focused on. And I'd say that's probably the best way that we can engage on that for the sort of co-managing of a security operation. And that, just to add a little bit more to that, the additional challenge will be the handoff between to have that continuous. If I look at our security analysts that are running our MDR services and our managed SOC services, they have that domain knowledge, and we work on that sort of knowledge transfer, that they understand customer environments, and I think that knowledge transfer would probably be difficult to maintain, but as a complete overlay for that initial sort of level and triage, then that's definitely something that we can provide. I don't know if either of you guys have got anything else to add to that. I think or we can move on to another question. we'll move on to another question. So just another question here. We're overrunning already, so I'll just spend another sort of 3 minutes on one last question, and we can answer the other ones as a follow-up. Chris, this is probably a great question for you. How do you move customers along the maturity diagram? So you showed that diagram relatively early on, which I think you said was a Darktrace approach.
Darktrace, yes.
So yeah, I guess the question here is, during the in-life running of a dSOC service, how would you move customers or a customer's environment through those stages? Or is it you just, I guess the question is, can you just buy dSOC and you end up at the very top of that maturity curve?
Yeah, so one of the measures of great success, in our opinion, is that when we initially engage customers who need a service like this, we find that there's a high number of enhanced monitoring and high severity events. And over time, we get to see how we see a definite decline in the amount of EMs and high severity events. So, for example, within 6 months, we see a massive taper down in terms of the amount of high severity events. And that's a great success, measure of success, because now you're dealing with being more proactive, predicting threats. And when you get to that state, you're dealing less and less with the enhanced monitoring, because through our collaborative efforts, we've managed to minimize or at least address those issues so that they're no longer big issues. And that's a great, our aim is to, during the triage sessions, we would rate you. There's a risk report to make available, and we rate your organization. There's 5 ratings. Red zone is number 5, and the green zone is number 1. Our aim is to get you to number 1, number 2. It's very difficult to achieve low rating, but the next best is medium to low. Complexity and size plays a big role in this as well. So our aim is to get you there. And the way we do it is by reducing the amount of high severity, putting out fires all the time, and focusing on being more proactive and predicting where the next threats are going to come from.
Excellent. So I did promise that was going to be the last question, but another question came in while we were doing the Q&A, and I think it's an interesting question that I'd like to challenge you with, Chris, and I challenge all of us with. And that question is, how does this differ to Darktrace's own MDR offering? So a very pointed question there. Chris, do you want to take that one to start with?
Yeah, sure. So Darktrace offer a great service as well. We're not going to knock anything that Darktrace does. They are our enablers in terms of this service. The difference between the Darktrace services, as you can imagine, they have 10,000 customers globally. They have a contact center with 750 analysts. So whenever a ticket is logged or there's an event, you might get somebody from the US, you might get somebody from Cambridge, or somebody from Singapore who's going to assist you. So the big difference is the amount of intimacy, if you will, that we're going to have with you and your team. We're going to become aware of your ebbs and flows in terms of what goes on in your environment. We will understand with your analysts. We'll be very close with them. We will become an extension of that team. Darktrace is a great organization, many good people, but they would not be able to become an extension of your team. There's just too many customers that they have to deal with in order to get that to that level of knowledge about your environment. So that's the one most important part. The next is that Darktrace is not going to do the daily grind, if you will. We are going to be performing that daily triage. Darktrace will make contact with you maybe 15 to 17 times in a 12-month period. We are guaranteed to give you 365 touch points every year.
Very good. I think there's also differences in terms of the deliverables as well, particularly when we look at dSOC plus MDR. Obviously, being able to that ability to integrate, much more widely outside of the Darktrace stack. I mean, obviously that's very important as well. But as you say, it's the depth of that engagement. Joe, off the top of my head, I have one more follow-up question for you, Chris, but I'm going to, which is around the dSOC versus the AI analyst, but we're not going to try and answer that today. What I will do is I'll put it down on pen and paper for you, and you can respond, and we can put it out on the follow-up, because I think that'd be a very interesting question, but we just don't have time for it today. One of the questions that's in that I will answer, which is, please, can you share the video / presentation at the end of this meeting? Of course we can. It's being recorded, and our marketing team or account managers will provide that to you during the follow-up with a link to view the recording so that we can play it back. And I'm sure there's no problem with us sharing a PDF of the slides as well. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for attending. I'd like to thank my guests today and co-hosts today, which is Omar Masood and Chris Durand. And on the screen at the moment, we can offer to book a demo and POC. So if you'd like to experience dSOC on your Darktrace environment and see the difference that is going to make, please reach out. There's a QR code that you can scan. This is a safe QR code. There's no question going on here. That will take you to a landing page where you can request that trial. And we can engage Chris and the team directly to integrate into your Darktrace systems, and you can start experiencing what Darktrace can deliver pretty quickly, and view that over a 30-day period free of charge. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and we'll see you next Wednesday on the next iteration of our weekly Wednesday webinar series. Thank you very much.